Okay, so since today we're talking about intellectual property, I thought I should give in to the fact that I know I'm going to talk for a while and record on my computer rather than my phone. Intellectual property is something I care a lot about, both as a content creator and as someone who likes to consume content. So, looking at various questions like whether we would 3D print presents. And you brought up Lego. And I think that one of the important things in that context is that you would, again, have to pay for the files. I mean, you could theoretically scan them, but that is. I think the main thing is it's way easier to pay for a file and then print it than to scan it, tweak it, print tests to make sure that it's correct. I mean, what this offers as an option is completely custom Lego sets. Like, say you want to get a castle set to give to your niece or nephew. And you can get the castle Lego sets, and at the store you can get them all in grey. But say your niece or nephew really wanted like a brick red one. If you had the file and the plastics and a MakerBot, you could theoretically pay Lego for their files and then print that set in custom colors and make more custom presents that way. And the ability to customize stuff makes presents more personal. And I knit basically all of my presents, and so I really appreciate the ability to personalize. And then back to MakerBots. We were kind of talking about, in the various videos, we were talking about materials and the possibilities and like how accessible 3D printers are. So MakerBot is kind of the gold standard for commercially available like regular person 3D printers. There are various ways to do 3D printing, but MakerBot works where you're doing additive printing, so basically it's lots of tiny little layers of plastic built up on each other. And materials are super important. And so, I'm kind of skeptical of the ability to print prescriptions because a lot of the formulations are already like the major part of making a prescription. And so you'd be buying like great big vats of powdered whatever your prescription is, and that just seems silly. And I mean, like a lot of it is path of least resistance, path of greatest commercial viability and convenience. So MakerBots, in terms of their accessibility, the like mini version, which is the smaller desktop version of their 3D printer, is $1,375. So I mean, it is theoretically acceptable to the average person, but it's still a major investment for a lot of people, and so it's something you would have to have some enthusiasm for already, and the disposable income to buy one. And I mean, Aaron, you brought up that whether this is something we can really know about in terms of accessibility, and I mean, it is. Today and Monday, when we were talking about technology in medicine, we're not really talking about speculative science fiction stuff anymore. We're talking about current technology and the problems we are going to be facing in the next few years. And the stuff that we're dealing with now and how we're going to navigate this going forward, because it's something that's already a problem. And then, in general, about copyright laws. I am actually in favor of weaker copyright laws and looser laws about intellectual property. A lot of that is because the way intellectual property in the US is structured is just completely dysfunctional. And digital rights management DRM locks tend to make things so that you can't access your own stuff if you change devices. And that's silly. And so this novelist, Cory Doctorow, he makes all of his novels available free online. And he's not the only one. He's just the biggest name that I think is likely for people to know. He makes everything free online. So you don't have to pirate it, you just download his novels in, any of several formats and several languages. And he's found that helps sales. And I mean, that's the thing. When people love something or want something correct, they're willing to pay for it. Well, not necessarily correct, going back talking about the Lego, not necessarily books again. And when people love something, they're willing to pay for it. And so I think the key isn't to lock up everything. The key is to make stuff people will love. And I mean, a lot of my opinions about this come from my position as someone who creates content. I put out my first novella in 2010 under a Creative Commons license, which means that it also is completely free to download, free to share and remix. And I feel really strongly about contributing to stuff like that. It's why I also use OpenOffice, and why I think Wikipedia is great, and why if I had more than the marginal tech skills I have, I would contribute to open source projects. Because all of that is really important. And I mean, intellectual property, if you create something innovative, then a weak intellectual property system should let you protect that. But I mean, the intellectual property system we have in place in the US is the one that allowed Myriad to make it all the way to the Supreme Court, claiming that they could own DNA. I mean, thankfully the Supreme Court shut them down. But, I mean, personal agency and our ability to own our own bodies, in addition to anything we generate intellectually, I mean, that is something that needs to be protected. Autonomy and owning the stuff we create, even if it is similar to something. Again, back to knitting and the stuff that I know from experience. The website ThinkGeek went around suing a bunch of small crafters who were making hats that looked like Jane's iconic hat from Serenity, and Firefly. And they were just suing small crafters because they wanted to sell the mass-produced version. And they weren't the same. Something that's handmade is going to be different, and it's going to be consistently different. And putting small crafters out of work for the sake of the ability to exploit probably third world labor, and putting skilled laborers in the United States out of work in favor of robots and people who are paid pennies a day strikes me as an incredibly abusive incarnation of an intellectual property system. And so I think that by loosening up restrictions, we encourage people to actually make novel things rather than harassing people with DMCAs instead of innovating. And I think that that's really important, and that is going to be increasingly important as MakerBots make it, and other 3D printers make it more possible to create similar things to hard goods that are available. And that it's going to be a really interesting next few years with the inevitable lawsuits.